Hello, everybody. Welcome back to a special edition here of the Playbook. Today, I'm joined with Trevor Lane, host of Lakers Nation and also the Front Office Show. You can check out all the social medias. I have them all right down there that you can post them and tag them and talk to them as well. Get along with the conversation that we're going to be having today. Obviously, as you can tell, about the Lakers, a team that's always in the media. It seems almost a bit too much, but obviously when you have LeBron on there, you're always going to get a bunch of media. But before we get into the nitty gritty, Trevor, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Doing great. Exciting part of the season. We've got Christmas coming up, all kinds of stuff going on right now. And of course, the trade rumors are already starting in. So this is a fun time of year. It's going to get even crazier over the next 6 weeks or so. But I'm having a good time and I'm ready for it.
Yeah, let's go. Okay, before we get into all the details, offense, defense, right now the Lakers sitting 15 and 11 overall, but obviously in the more recent stretch with the in-season tournament included, 12 and 6 in the last 18 games, and that win percentage will put them right there at second if the season started 18 games ago. But just let's get your overall thoughts of kind of how the season has transpired so far.
Well, I think we're just now starting to get a sense of what this team really is. They've had so many injuries, so many players shuffling in and out of the lineup. There's still players who aren't back. I mean, Gabe Vincent still not back. Only played the first 4 games of the season, and that's it. So I think what this team wanted to be, what this team was constructed to be, we didn't really get a sense of that because they were sort of in desperation mode for the majority of the season. Just guys constantly shuffling in and out. Most nights they were having like 8 players in the rotation, and that was about it. And it wasn't necessarily the 8 players that you would want to see there. LeBron and Anthony Davis have largely been healthy for they've been banged up, but they've been playing for much of the season, so that has helped them stay afloat. Now I think we're starting to get a sense of what they really are, and that is a very good defensive team when they can really lock down. They have a lot of wings that they can throw at people. I think they could use another big, and we'll talk, I'm sure, a little bit about that. But I think the biggest thing is LeBron still looks like LeBron. And even at age 38, and he's going to turn 39 in about a week or so here, he still looks like himself, still is an absolutely incredible player, one of the top players in the NBA, which is remarkable given his age. And Anthony Davis still has the ability to be an absolute monster on the defensive end of the floor. And when you have those two things, you definitely have a shot in today's NBA. So I think they're positioned well. And I think we're starting to get a sense of what this team really can be and see where their weaknesses are, which we may see if they shore up by the trade deadline.
One of the things you brought up, obviously the injuries, and you talked about LeBron being back to kind of being his springy self. It always confused me in the playoffs last season when obviously he was a little bit compromised with that tendon foot injury, and everyone was like, oh, this is the end. But now you watch him again, head back at the rim, being his normal self. But let's talk a little bit about the injuries of this team. And boy, there's been a bunch of them. Obviously, a couple nights ago, the whole starting five was in the injury report. So that obviously doesn't bode well for a Lakers team trying to kind of build this stability. But through the injuries, you have to be at least kind of optimistic about how they've been able to be at this position, although with those injuries.
Yeah, I mean, this was a team that over the summer we talked about them a lot. That they've got depth that we haven't seen in the last few years, especially when they were the 3 stars, when it was Russell Westbrook, LeBron James, Anthony Davis. They simply had no money left over in the budget to go add any other guys that were above veteran minimum status. So now they've finally got a number of players. You've got Rui Hachimura, you've got DAngelo Russell, Gabe Vincent, of course, has been out for much of the season, but Jared Vanderbilt, Austin Reeves. You've got this core group of guys that you've paid to be more than just standard role players, veteran minimum guys that you just kind of take a flyer on. You've paid these guys to step up, and we're starting to get a sense of what that can be with this team. So I think that through the injuries, yes, their depth has helped them. We've also found that there is a breaking point to that. They do have depth, but that only goes so far. There are games where you see them where it's just clear they're missing too many pieces in order to really put forth a concerted effort to go win a game. But more often than not, they are able to find a way. And then we saw in the in-season tournament what they can do when they have most of their team healthy. They can really be a devastating defensive unit. So that's what's exciting about the future for the Lakers. And so far, considering how many games they've lost due to injury, how many players they've lost due to injury, you got to be pretty excited about the fact that they're right now sitting at 15 and 11 here at this point in the season. I think being this far above 500, despite the fact that as we're recording this, that's only 8th in the Western Conference. that's still a big positive, I think, given how many players have been in and out of the rotation.
Yeah, it's eighth in the Western Conference, and obviously, as the Western Conference always is, it's hectic with how much movement that you can have up and down those standings. You mentioned one of those holes that I'm definitely wanted to talk about, and I wanted to get your take on it. I called it a big problem here because obviously it's a problem with the bigs, but how big of a problem is it? And we saw it already, but just your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, basically what it comes down to is that Jackson Hayes, Christian Wood, they're just not quite enough to really hold the Lakers over when Anthony Davis is out of the game. And look, for the most part, knock on wood, he's been fairly healthy so far this season. He is managing an active injury. He's got a hip issue, so that's been a problem. But Anthony Davis is a guy who's known to miss games throughout the season. And so the hope was that Christian Wood, Jackson Hayes, they'd be enough to hold it down, hold down the center position. There's always going to be a drop off from Anthony Davis. He's maybe the best defensive player in the NBA, probably the best defensive big in the NBA. And so you're going to have a drop off no matter who you have behind him once you don't have him on the floor. But instead, what we're finding, though, is that everything really falls to pieces when Anthony Davis isn't out there. So I think what they could use is another truly big physical player. Christian Wood, he's not shot the three well this season, but that's the big part of his game that differentiates him as a big in today's NBA. It's the ability to step out. He's not a great rim protector. He's not a ferocious rebounder or anything of that nature. Jackson Hayes is a tremendous athlete, but he fouls a lot. It's hard for him to stay on the floor, and he doesn't have a lot of size to him either. So when Anthony Davis is out of the game, you see teams going straight to the basket because there's not a lot of fear of Hayes and Christian Wood there. So I think they could use another 250 plus pound big dude that they can put in there that can protect the paint a little bit and give them that look. It's something that they're lacking, and it's a noticeable thing that they're lacking when Anthony Davis is out of the game. So we'll see if that's something they address before the trade deadline coming up on February 8th.
One of the things that I was talking about on the playbook, and I know you definitely were tweeting about and talking about in the Lakers Nation, even before this season, was the necessity and need of getting another physical big. And there were a couple in the market before the season started. Obviously, they didn't take any waivers on a guy like Bismack Biyombo, who was available at the time. I just want to get your take. Why do you think that the Lakers didn't go out and get a guy like that in the offseason to bring in with an obviously need of physicality at the rim?
Well, they made the decision they were going to go all in on Christian Wood, so essentially gambling that his three-point shooting would be enough to mitigate those concerns in the paint. And again, he's not shot the ball well from three. I think he's at 28% right now on the season, which is way below his career averages. So hopefully that will come back around. But they went for Christian Wood because he's got a bit more versatility, has the ability to be an offensive threat, even though, again, it has been quite a typical season for him. So I think it was a defensible decision to go after Christian Wood in lieu of another big, especially given the bigs that were out there. Bismack Biyombo wound up getting about double a veteran minimum salary from the Memphis Grizzlies, in addition to an opportunity to start because of the injuries to Steven Adams and Brandon Clark. And so Biyombo, I don't know if the Lakers had offered him a veteran minimum and being maybe a third string, maybe a second string big, I don't know if that would have swayed him, or if he was specifically holding out, hoping that the Grizzlies situation would come to fruition. It certainly did. So it worked out for him to wait and wind up in Memphis. But other than Biyombo and Christian Wood, there was a good chunk of the summer where we were saying it's these two bigs on the market, and that's about it. I think the center position was actually pretty thin this season. In seasons past, we've seen situations where you can find a guy for the veteran minimum and be just fine. We certainly saw it with Dwight Howard, with JaVale McGee, the Lakers landing those guys, and that wound up being a great duo. The next season, you had Marc Gasol, even Montrezl Harrell in the mix, getting Andre Drummond on the buyout market, all guys who were serviceable bigs. There simply weren't names like that on the market this summer. I think it was somewhat unique in terms of the big market. So the Lakers may have to do a little bit of digging to go find somebody. I know people look at it and say, well, they could have got Biyombo. I don't know if that was the case or not because of what he ultimately received from the Memphis Grizzlies. So I think it made sense at the time to go ahead and do this. They do still have a roster spot open. So if another big pops free on the buyout market in a few months, they can certainly go fill the position there. But for the time being, the Lakers were hoping they can get by with what they've got. And then if they need to make an adjustment before the deadline, they can. But I think so far it's been pretty clear that, I don't think they're going to get away with just having Christian Wood and Jackson Hayes in the middle.
Now, this is something that kind of just popped into my head. I didn't really think about this being a possibility at all
Mhm.
before the season, but there's a bunch of talk. I remember were bringing about bringing back Tristan Thompson. Obviously, he had a really good couple minutes. Let's just say one game in Game 4
Right.
against Jokic in the Denver Nuggets. But do you think there was any conversation, at least in your brain, about maybe bringing him back for this season to fill that void?
Well, he's in Cleveland now, so they picked him up. I did hear at one point over the summer that the Lakers essentially had like a standing offer out to Tristan Thompson that if he wanted to come back, sometime into the season, that he could. That it was something where maybe he would want to skip training camp or something and then come join up. But Cleveland had an offer for him. He wound up taking that. This was by the time he signed with Cleveland. This was a couple of months after I had even heard that rumor, but that sounded like it was a thing that the Lakers at least had some interest in from people I talked to. But he wound up taking a deal to go back to Cleveland, so he'll be there, and the Lakers will be looking elsewhere for the time being.
Okay, so let's forget all the hypotheticals with movement and all that stuff. Although that's always fun to talk about. Let's talk about who the Lakers have at hand. And one thing's for sure about this team, you see it every day post game and in the press conferences in the locker room. This chemistry on the team is undeniable, right? I mean, these guys really seem to enjoy each other's presence, whether it's LeBron, talking to Rui about the mask thing a couple nights ago, or D'Angelo just being that spiritual leader, it seems to be on the court. Just with obviously everything going around, this team seems more connected than any Lakers teams in the recent history, right?
I would say the 2019-2020 team. Now, obviously, they won a championship, so we'd have to look at it through that lens. But that team, that team had something, and this team I think does have it too, to a degree. So that team, what they had was an understanding of everyone's roles from day one. In fact, I vividly remember Jared Dudley talking to us about that on media day. We said everybody, with the exception of Kyle Kuzma at the time, because they hadn't quite figured out what Kuzma's role was going to be just yet. But every other player on the team knew exactly what it was the team needed them to do from day one. And that's part of why that team took off. They got off to such a great start, and they developed that instant chemistry, that instant bond that is frankly an outlier in today's NBA. You don't see so many new players come together and then instantly gel the way that team did. I will say this team has had fun playing together. I think they do enjoy being together, probably more than some of the teams, the post-championship teams did. But it's similar in a way to that team, but I think because of having so many injuries, they haven't had quite so many opportunities to really settle into their roles. In fact, that's what we were starting to see in the in-season tournament was guys really, and Darin Ham talked about this, guys really settle into what their roles are, where their minutes are coming from, all that sort of stuff. And then, of course, more injuries cropped up, and so that kind of all got washed away. Hopefully, that will eventually return. But that's been the big differentiator between, say, that championship team and the subsequent teams was everybody fully understanding their roles and being able to settle into those roles and not having a lot of movement throughout the course of the season. This team, I think, can do that. They just have to have their guys available in order to do it.
Yeah, it's something that LeBron talks about almost every night is
Yeah.
having that continuity, seeing what they got in those teams. And as you mentioned, they were seeing it in that in-season tournament that they ended up being able to take away with victoriously. And then obviously injuries come back to bite them. Let's talk a little bit about the in-season tournament because everyone's had their own opinions. I haven't heard your opinion just yet. Maybe I missed it, but that's okay. I was waiting for this to talk about it. Just your opinion about the in-season tournament. Everyone's got their own discrepancies, whether it's the timing of it or just validity of it or whatever. But my favorite part about it was what D'Angelo Russell said, that this is a cheat code for the playoffs and getting that kind of playoff type environment. Just your takes.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was the big win because the question, because when we were at Summer League back in July, and the NBA is promoting the in-season tournament everywhere. I mean, you're walking down the strip in Vegas and you're seeing big ads for the NBA in-season tournament. They are hyping this thing to the moon. And a lot of the fans were reacting just by rolling their eyes, and they're going, we're not going to care about that. Nobody's going to care about this. It's a soccer style tournament. It's the regular season. It's not a real championship. Who cares? But the real question wasn't so much, are fans going to care about it? Because that's not even the first domino that has to fall. The first thing that needs to happen is, are fans going to care about it? This is the problem with the All-Star game right now. Fans don't care about it because the players don't care about it. If the players care about it, then the fans will follow. That's the way it's going to go. And that's exactly what we had happen. There were questions. Is $500,000 enough incentive for players to care when some of these guys are multi-millionaires, in LeBron's case, billionaire? And the answer was a resounding yes. The players took it very seriously. For the fans, the end result was we got playoff intensity basketball, as DAngelo Russell was talking about, in November and December, which is a nice precursor for the playoffs. Gives you a little bit of a leg up on teams that maybe didn't get that experience. So that's a big win, obviously, for the Lakers and for other teams that went deep into this tournament. But also, just from the NBA perspective, I thought the tournament was fantastic because the players cared. You got something exciting during a time of year when a lot of fans are just waiting for Christmas to start paying attention to the NBA. And so I thought it's checked a lot of boxes and was overall a big success. Now, as far as things that I'd like to see adjusted, I think the final game should count for the standings. I don't know what you have to do in order to make that happen, but every other game counted for the regular season. Why shouldn't the final count as well? I also think that there is a little bit of an advantage to be gained by not doing quite as well in the tournament. You look at situations like the Knicks, who wound up with a couple of extra very difficult matchups on their schedule because they had a little bit more success than teams who didn't, and then they wound up with easier matchups being added to their schedule. So that could, change some regular season standings in the long run. But the biggest thing for me, it's the floors. Those floors, I get the idea. They want the casual fan to be flipping through the channels and stop and go, what is happening in the NBA? Something is going on, and pay attention to it. I understand that, but it was to a point, in my opinion, where the floors were taken away from the game. It was a distraction from the game itself. I think you could accomplish the goal of making it clear that something special is happening without burning our eyeballs out. It was taking me like half the game just to get adjusted to the floor itself. And maybe that's me being grumpy old man, but that's that was one of the things that I would like to see tweaked. You don't have to get rid of them completely, but let's tone down the floors a little bit, please.
Yeah, it's like they do in the finals. The finals courts, you can't even tell it's a finals game, except for, you have maybe a logo on the basket. And then now in the in-season tournament, it's the other extreme. So I thought that was hilarious. I remember when the Lakers played the Trailblazers. I mean, I could barely watch that game. LeBron wore his shoes to kind of resemble the court. I couldn't even tell he was wearing shoes half the time just because of that court. I really did enjoy it as well. I had a little thing to throw out there. Maybe I can get your take, since you talked about things you liked and you didn't like. Since everyone kind of, and LeBron was asked this at the end there in that little Final Four situation, the semifinals, quarterfinals, and whatever, they kind of had a March Madness feel to it. And it kind of got me thinking that a lot of people, when the group play was going on, people weren't as excited with the group play as they were with the actual single elimination games. So I was thinking, hey, why don't we full blown March Madness this thing? And obviously scheduling would be a whole mess about how to do it, but just do a 30-team single elimination tournament. What do you think?
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. The single elimination part was definitely probably the most exciting piece to it. So yeah, you could do something like that. I know they wanted to emulate soccer and do kind of a World Cup style group stage and have these games count for the regular season. Maybe I haven't thought through. I'm not great when it comes to scheduling this stuff, so I haven't thought through exactly what that would look like in terms of how do you adapt the schedule to fit. So that may be an issue, because if you have a team that's eliminated in round one, obviously they're not playing quite as many games, and then you've got a lot of kind of shuffling and flexibility you need later on in the schedule, which is difficult when you're trying to book arenas and all that sort of stuff. But that would be, I think, the biggest hurdle to it, is just having the flexibility to run something like that and still have them count as regular season games. But it certainly would be exciting. I think you're right. I think the single elimination feel was definitely driving some, I don't know about all the intensity, but it was creating some excitement, especially once they got out of that group stage. So I like it. I don't know logistically how they would work it out, but what smarter people than I am could probably figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, if people want it, I guess they can try to figure that out. So I really enjoyed that in-season tournament. I kind of reserved my thoughts when I first heard it. I was like, all right, I'm not going to go instant reaction and think of everything. I was going to let it play out, see how it went, and then make my opinion after that. And I ended up really enjoying it. we talked about a little bit before about the bigs and obviously trade season coming up. So I want to get your takes now because a lot of people are starting to throw in DAngelo Russell and into these trade scenarios and all these other things to maybe get a big back. I just want to get your take on what you think, other than bigs, like what that trade scene might look like here.
So I think for the Lakers, a lot of this trade season, because yes, DAngelo Russell, contractually, DAngelo Russell is going to wind up in trade discussions simply because he's got a player option this coming summer and he's got a contract the size that's very movable and that you're probably going to need to put into a deal just to get something done. So simply for those reasons, he's automatically going to be kind of in trade discussions. And that's not to speak to, whether or not the Lakers are trying to move on from him if they don't think he's good enough or any of that. That's just contractually. I think the Lakers could use another point of attack defender, particularly a guard. I think Cam Reddish has done better at that than we would have expected coming into the season. And you're getting Jared Vanderbilt, who's still getting his legs under him. You're getting him back. But of course, the name that's been thrown out a lot has been Alex Caruso. Could you bring back our old friend and have him back in LA? Or is there another defensive guard that you could find? That's something the team could certainly use. Both DAngelo Russell and Austin Reeves, whether they're extremely talented, neither one of them are good defensive players. So maybe that's a skill set that you could use. And then three-point shooting. This team has struggled shooting the ball from deep. They have risen up in the rankings in terms of three-point percentage in recent weeks, but they're still not a good three-point shooting team. They're not a high-volume three-shooting team either. And so that puts them at a disadvantage a lot of nights where teams are shooting more and making more threes. And that's causing the Lakers to have to be even more effective in the paint in order to get wins. So perhaps another shooter, but as Lakers fans will tell you, there is that Lakers tax, that Lakers curse, whatever you want to call it. For some reason, the shooting specialists, when they put on that Lakers jersey, their percentages drop by like 5 to 10%. So I don't even know if that's a given that landing a shooting specialist will change things all that much. But this team could definitely use outside shooting. It's always been the case for years. They've been a poor three-point shooting team, so they can certainly use that skill set. Another defensive guard, then another big that can man the middle when Anthony Davis is out. I think those are the three things on the Lakers list right now. If you want to add a fourth thing, you could use another scorer, and maybe you can get a scorer that could check a box as a three-point shooter too. But you could use somebody else who can put the ball in the basket for minutes when LeBron James is not on the floor. So all things that could be on the Lakers shopping list for the trade deadline. Are they going to get all of them? Almost certainly not. May not get any of them. We'll see. But those are things that they're going to need, and then it'll be interesting to see how the Lakers prioritize all those.
Yeah, and one of the things that you mentioned was kind of that whenever another team is starting to hit their threes, the Lakers kind of find themselves in a really tough spot. You look back at the Mavericks game in which no one was expecting the Mavericks to hit all those shots, but they did, and then they ended up being victorious because of it. It wasn't so much that the Lakers weren't doing anything crazy. It was just the other team was just out shooting them in that game. So I think a shooter is definitely something to look at. It's something that really kind of not bothers me, but something that I'm kind of confused about, and I want to get your take on it, is the actual player DAngelo Russell, because you see him and how he's able to kind of work the offense, and everyone's talked about having another guy who can call plays and run an offense outside of LeBron. That's always another thing that everyone always talks about. And, you look at, obviously, assist numbers tell you one thing, but in the game too, he's a guy that a lot of people seem to like. He's a guy that seems like he can facilitate the ball pretty well, and his shooting, yes, inconsistent, but on some nights he looks like he can go off for 30 as he did a week ago. So I just want to get your take on just DAngelo Russell himself and if he actually has a future on this team.
Well, I think he does, in the sense that, he's in his mid-20s still. He could be part of the team for a long time. He's not like he's a veteran at age 35 or something like that. He's an experienced player despite being still in his mid-20s, so he gives you that. He shoots the ball well from outside. He's in a little bit of a slump right now, but he's shooting, I believe, 38% from three. Last season, it was 40%. You'll certainly take that. He can act as an on-ball or off-ball player and probably be equally efficient in either one of those things. He can give you some points. He isn't the most consistent guy in the world. He can have hot shooting nights. He can have cold shooting nights, so he can be a bit streaky. Defensively, he doesn't give you a lot to be excited about. He does have a long wingspan. He's like 6'4" with the 6'10" wingspan, so that helps him out a little bit in passing lanes. But defensively, he's going to have some challenges because he's not the most athletic guy in the world. So there are things that fit, there are things that don't fit so well. Like ideally, you would have a little bit better defensive player in that role. But the challenge with DeAngelo Russell, and so he is very polarizing. There's people who either hate DeAngelo Russell or love DeAngelo Russell.
Yeah.
And the challenge with that is no matter what side you fall on, you're going to find tons of evidence to support your cause. You're going to have nights where he goes nuts and he scores 35, and you can say, see, look, this team needs D'Lo. And you're going to have nights where he puts up 9 points on 3 for 12 shooting and turns the ball over a few times. And then you can say, well, look, see, DeAngelo Russell isn't providing much. Why don't you move on from him? So he's going to create arguments for either side because his play fluctuates so much. And that's something that I'm pretty at peace with, but a lot of fans, they get frustrated with seeing those ups and downs and ups and downs and ups and downs. If they do decide to move on from him, and I think we saw this the other night against the Spurs, if you don't have DeAngelo Russell out on the floor, you probably need to go find another ball handler. So if you flip DeAngelo Russell to go get a big on the market, you need somebody else to come in a subsequent move that can handle the basketball and set up an offense and organize it, because otherwise you're putting a lot of pressure on LeBron James and Austin Reeves to do it. And you can say, well, Gabe Vincent, maybe he's going to come back. That's still not really his primary skill set, is organizing the offense and acting as a facilitator. DeAngelo Russell is on another level compared to him there. So that is a challenge with moving D'Lo, is that you need to go find somebody else that can initiate the offense for you. But if the right move comes along, I think the Lakers will entertain it. His contract says that you have to. I think D'Lo's skill set fits just fine with this team. Is it perfect? No. And so that's why it kind of puts him in this limbo where you have to listen to offers. You have to consider deals. I don't think they need to be in a rush to move him, though, either. So they can really go any direction with DeAngelo Russell and just take what the market gives them.
And now another person that, I mean, probably one of the more polarizing people on this team as well. It's obviously the coach and Darin Ham. A lot of people have accused him of not being too much of a presence. Yes, he's a guy that a lot of the team seems to enjoy and gets along with the players. But when it comes to X's and O's, fans say that there's usually a lot to be left desired. I mean, what do you see in a guy like Darin Ham? Is he the right coach for this team? And, kind of your thoughts on him.
I think that the jury is still out on Darin Ham. He has a team that he should be able to do just about anything with. If he wants to play bigger, if he wants to play smaller, if he wants to play fast, wants to play slow, he should have enough flexibility and versatility on this roster to do whatever he wants. I think that the X's and O's have left something to be desired. One of my pet peeves has been his timeout usage or lack thereof. I haven't agreed with his strategy there. I've also seen a lot of games where the effort has kind of waned for this team, and that's for a guy who's supposed to be that coach that keeps everybody inspired and everybody wants to run through a brick wall for him. That's maybe a little bit concerning, but I get a lot of fans griping about Darin Ham on my show all the time. And it's anytime the Lakers lose, it's fire Darin Ham, get rid of, they win the in-season tournament, then they lose the next game, fire Darin Ham, get rid of him. It's not going to happen because they just went to the Western Conference Finals. They won the in-season tournament, and coaches who do those things, they don't lose their jobs. And then on top of that, I think you have to look at, well, who are you replacing him with?
Exactly.
It's easy just to jump to fire the coach. Who's taking over that's going to do a better job than him, that's going to fix this? I don't know that he is the coach long-term, that he's the solution long-term. I know the Lakers have been hoping to find that guy. They thought it was Luke Walton at one point. It was not. They hoped it was Frank Vogel. I thought Frank Vogel got unfairly scapegoated for what happened during his season with Russell Westbrook. That obviously didn't work out. And they moved on from him. Now you've got Darin Ham, who the same thing. Okay, we've got a leader here that's going to command respect around the organization. I don't know for sure that he's the guy long-term. We'll find out. I think this season, especially when we get to the playoffs, is going to give us a really good indication, because I thought last year in the playoffs against Memphis, he made the right moves. Playoffs are all about adjustments to the adjustments and so on. I thought he made really smart moves against Memphis. I thought he made really smart moves against Golden State. And then he completely lost it against the Denver Nuggets and started small against a team that's massive. And it put the Lakers in a very difficult spot, and they just never recovered from that. So I think this season, the remainder of the season and the playoffs, is going to give us a pretty good indication of what Darin Ham can do. Is he the guy moving forward? I still don't know if that's going to be the case. He still leaves something to be desired if it's me trying to make the decision right now.
Yeah, and obviously a lot of people I've seen this like every game. Someone's pulling up a clip and saying, "Why is Darin Ham doing
Yeah.
this?" I remember the last Spurs game; they start off in zone, and just kind of everyone's kind of wondering why in the world he would do that rather than going to a more man a defense. And you're going to get all the Twitter coaches out every time it seems after every game, as you mentioned. I want to get your thoughts just holistically about the team moving towards kind of. We talked about trade deadline and whatever. You mentioned the playoffs. Obviously, I think this team is obviously more than capable to make it to those playoffs. But what do you think once the team is healthy, once everything's kind of in place? What do you think is the potential to this team? I'm not going to say the max potential because obviously that's championship. But what do you think is the more realistic potential for this roster?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've shown that when everybody's healthy, they can be one of the best teams in the NBA. We saw them take their play to another level, which was a source of frustration prior to the tournament because we saw them, they would beat bad teams and then lose the games to good teams. And so that left people saying, well, they must not really be that good because they can't take their game up to that next level. Well, finally, we saw them do it during the in-season tournament. They approached those games very, very seriously. They put playoff level intensity on the floor for those games. And we saw them take it to another level and prove that, especially defensively, that they can do some real damage in this league. So I think when they're healthy, they can be one of the best teams in the league. Does that make them championship favorites? No, I think there's a lot of other teams that are very, very good, but they can be among that group. Now, again, it takes them playing at their best, though, and having their guys healthy in order to get there. But it's somewhat comforting to see that they can get to that level. And it makes you think that if they had a tweak here or there to this roster, maybe that could really propel them forward to be something special. But once again, we've seen these flashes that at least tell us that it's there, and that has certainly raised the optimism for Lakers fans.
So we've talked about a bunch of stuff here. Before I let you go, just want to ask you: is there anything you think we missed? Any other storyline you think is cool? You want to talk about for a little bit?
I think that when we're looking at this Lakers team, just the longevity of LeBron, his ability to continue to perform at this level despite being 38 going on 39 years old, that's something that I never want to overlook just because it's easy because it's LeBron. It's easy to forget that what we're watching on a night in, night out basis is unprecedented. This has never been done before. For somebody to players have played to his age before, but played at this level at this age hasn't happened. So I think it's important that we acknowledge that and that we recognize what we are seeing on a night-to-night basis with LeBron out there, because at some point he's not going to be able to. I don't know when it's going to be, but at some point he's not going to be able to do that anymore. So it's important that we appreciate it while he is still playing at the level that he's at, and he has a player option this summer. So who knows what happens after this? So again, my big thing for Lakers fans, it's just appreciate what we've got right now because we don't know how much longer that we're going to have this with LeBron James in purple and gold and doing what he's doing.
Trevor, I'm going to be honest with you. I was told by my partners that if I came in here and asked you a question about LeBron, they would crucify me because if you go up and down my Twitter, I love LeBron. I'm a big LeBron guy. So they challenge me every time I talk to somebody about the Lakers. Hey, don't talk about LeBron. That's what they don't do it. Just talk about everything else. So I don't want you to think that I'm neglecting it or that I'm not talking about it. I'm a big LeBron guy. I don't understand how he's able to look not better, but it seems in certain aspects he does look better. He's shooting 40% from three this year. He's got that jump back that he lost in the postseason because of that injury. It's just, I mean, there's not enough words, not enough adjectives. I could use the whole thesaurus to kind of talk about that guy. But I just wanted to clear the room, make sure that let you know that I'm not forgetting about it. I was just challenged by my partners not to talk about it.
Well, see, I brought it up, so it's my fault. So you could tell them, you can blame it on me. You got to talk a little bit about LeBron, and it's my fault. I was the one who brought it up.
It's your fault, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it being your fault because you allowed me to finish this off on a perfectly high note. Well, thanks so much, Trevor. Once again, his socials down right here at Trevor_Lane on X, host of at Lakers Nation and at Front Office Show as well. Trevor, it was so fun talking to you. Thank you again.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me. Happy to do it.